Most people think violence came to Norway with the Vikings, that the warriors, the raids, the hard, brutal edge all arrived with the first longship. But the Vikings did not come from nowhere. They were the product of 1,000 years of Iron Age Norway. And before a single longship ever left a fjord, Norway had already survived something that makes the Viking Age look mild. Something that may have killed half the population. Something so catastrophic it may be encoded in Norse mythology to this day. This is the story of the Iron Age in Norway. 1,300 years of transformation. The first real warriors. The first chieftains who commanded armies. Contact with the Roman Empire at the edge of the known world. And then, in the year 536, an event so terrible some believe it is, where the myth of Ragnarök was born. Let us get into it. The Iron Age in Norway began around 500 BC and ran all the way to the Viking Age, around 800 AD. 1,300 years, the same distance in time as from today back to the Norman conquest. The first thing to understand is how different iron was from bronze. Bronze needed a global trade network. Norway had to import every scrap. Undeldokt of Herstrid Historia. Iron needed nothing of the kind. You could pull iron ore straight out of a bog, smelt it, and forge a blade. No trade routes, no chieftain controlling the supply. Iron, democratized metal. In many ways, this was a gift. More farms could afford iron tools, fields were cleared, harvests grew, and the population climbed. But iron also made weapons far better, stronger, sharper, more durable. And when everyone can make iron weapons, everyone does. The archaeological record shows it plainly. Rising conflict across Iron Age Scandinavia, more warrior graves, the first hill forts. Growing evidence of raiding along the coasts. The peaceful north was quietly arming itself. There is a strange gap here, though the earliest stretch, roughly 500 to 0 BC, is sometimes called the Findless Age. Very few artifacts survive from it. Whether the population fell, or burial customs changed, or we simply have not dug in the right places, nobody is certain. By the height of the Roman Empire, from around 0 to 400 AD, Norway sat far beyond Rome's reach. No legion ever marched this far north. But Norway was not cut off from Rome either. Roman goods poured into Scandinavia through trade, glassware, silver, coins, wine, and great bronze cauldrons. One such cauldron, cast along the Rhine around 300 AD, was found at Avaldsnes in western Norway. Norwegian warriors served in Roman auxiliary forces too, learning Roman discipline. Then carrying those ideas home along with new weapons. The North was learning what organized power looked like. Norwegian society was hardening into a hierarchy. Powerful chieftains gathered control over local farmers. And it was not only about wealth, it was about protection. A farmer gave loyalty and tribute, and in return he got security. The scaffolding of the Viking Age was being raised here, quietly, centuries early. And in western Norway, something remarkable turned up. A warrior grave at Kolstow, near Avaldsnes. It held an iron torque. A neck ring like this was the badge of Celtic chieftains on the continent. But here Norwegian smiths had remade that symbol in iron. Torques of this kind are found nowhere else in Europe, only Norway. Now the part of Iron Age Norway that almost nobody talks about. The year 536. A massive volcanic eruption thought to have struck in Iceland or possibly Central America. It hurled enormous quantities of ash and sulfate into the upper atmosphere. It drew a veil around the whole planet and dimmed the sun for as long as 18 months. This is not folklore. Tree rings and ice cores confirm it. The summer of 536 left frost damage in tree rings right across Scandinavia. In Norway's Jæren region, one of the most fertile farming areas, archaeologists find direct evidence of agricultural collapse. The Byzantine historian Procopius wrote that the sun gave no warmth that year. Chinese records describe snow in summer. Irish annals speak of famine and failed harvests across Europe. In Norway, never a warm land to begin with, the effect was catastrophic. Researchers consider it plausible that parts of Scandinavia lost up to half their population. But the damage was uneven. Some valleys were devastated, parts of Sweden were barely touched, or even prospered. This was no uniform collapse. Scandinavian elites began burying enormous hoards of gold. Perhaps as desperate offerings to bring the sun back. And here is the connection some researchers now take seriously. The Norse myth of Fimbulwinter. 3 winters with no summer, stars falling, the world unravelling. It may be a cultural memory of 536. Ragnarök itself, the end of everything, may echo the terror of watching the sky go dark and the harvest die. That remains a hypothesis, not settled fact, but it is a haunting one. And what came next is no myth at all. From the ashes of that century, a harder, more militarized Norway rose. Recent work by Solheim and Iversen argues that only the most organized, most capable farmsteads survived the famine, giving rise to the hierarchical hall culture we recognize as the Viking world. The Vikings were not born from peace. They were forged by catastrophe. The Iron Age was never just a warm-up act for the Vikings. It was 1,300 years of Norway becoming Norway. Local iron that needed no trade route. Contact with Rome that taught new lessons about power and hierarchy. A culture that took a Celtic symbol and made it uniquely its own. And then the catastrophe of 536, which shattered some regions and spared others. A scar so deep that Norse mythology may still carry its shape 1,500 years later. The people who survived that became the ancestors of the Vikings. They were already hard, long before the first raid. Next time, the Viking Age is about to begin. But before the first raid, what did Norway actually look like in the 700s? Who were these people? How did they live? And why did they suddenly start sailing west with axes in their hands? That is episode 4. Subscribe for the full journey, from the Stone Age to modern Norway. And drop a comment. Had you ever heard the theory that Ragnarok might be based on a real event? That one genuinely surprised me.